Howdy, howdy, howdy. My name's Nacho Sasuke. Welcome back to Let's Read the Nightmare Fuel on TV Tropes of the MCU. This episode was supposed to happen last Monday, but last Monday was Memorial Day, so I spent the whole day hanging out with my friend instead of recording anything. And I don't have any excuses for Tuesday. No, wait. I think last week was the week where I didn't have all of my recording equipment, so I literally could not. Anyway, it doesn't look like there's a whole. Okay, there's several things for Agent Carter. I've never seen Agent Carter, so I don't really know what the deal is with this show. But it sure did spoil some things. So, season one, the Blitzkrieg button. Dottie killing Mr. Mink, particularly her dead-eyed stare when telling him she wants his gun before abruptly snapping his neck before he can retaliate. Ratcheted up by the shot near the end of the episode of his corpse stashed under her bed while she plays with her new pistol in front of her vanity. What's the pistol that she did all that? The iron ceiling. The Soviet Tyke bomb project includes shackling the trainees to their beds at night. This goes on for so long that some adult graduates of the program, like Dottie, can't sleep unless they handcuff themselves to their bed. Dottie barely hesitates before snapping the neck of her friend after she beats her in a sparring match. A sin to err. Dottie murders a dentist with his own drill, through his eye, and we even see his dead, bloodied face. At least he deserved it. Who the hell is Dottie, and why is she such a terrible person? I mean, it sounds like she's a terrible person because of the Tyke Bomb project, but still. Even though it turns out they're allies, not enemies, the scene where Dottie appears to be about to snipe Dr. Ivchenko is a really tense moment. Dottie isn't Agent Carter, is it? I doubt it. But I also don't know what Agent Carter's first name is. He's just casually talking to Dooley and admiring the city, while the audience is bracing themselves for when his head is going to explode. The reveal of Ivchenko as not just a mere psychiatrist, but a talented hypnotist who's in cahoots with Leviathan. With just several minutes of undisturbed time, he's able to turn Yauch, an SSR agent initially frosty towards him, into his loyal puppet just by identifying what he wants the most through a simple interrogation. Then, when he has no more use for him, Ivchenko orders Yauch to act perfectly casual, buy himself a drink, and then walk into traffic. The fact that Dottie came this close to killing Peggy Carter. Okay. I feel like I knew that, but there was no reason for my brain to retain it. Anyway, Dr. Ivchenko's hypnotism. Apart from a few instances of Dooley noticing the slightest flaws for a moment or two, it works perfectly, to the point that Ivchenko nearly destroys the SSR outright by forcing Dooley to put on a failed heating vest prototype of Stark's invention, thus setting it to explode in the midst of the SSR's offices before Dooley pulls a heroic sacrifice to narrowly avert mass catastrophe. We are shown that the dentist Dottie killed in the last episode was left to rot at his own office. Seeing Sosa walk into the fly-written corpse covered by a sheet, you can only imagine how it smells, is one thing. Remembering Dottie was communicating with Ivchenko in the same room in a previous scene only adds up to it. Dottie, quote-unquote, and Dr. Ivchenko, having successfully and easily stolen Item 17 from the SSR lab, take it or a sample thereof, into a crowded movie theater, release it, and then leave and bar the doors. The people nearby start to cough from the gas, whereupon everyone in the theater rapidly descends into madness and gleefully mauls each other to death. Serves as paranoia fuel, but how exactly does Leviathan know so much about Stark's inventions? Ivchenko seems to perfectly know how the vest works, a fact only known to both Jarvis and Stark himself. They also know about Item 17, and even Jarvis doesn't know anything about it. Valediction. Turns out there's a very good reason why Fenhoff knew about Item 17. He was there when it was first used during the Battle of Fenau. The final scene. Fenhoff, with his mouth gagged with a metal mask, i.e. Hannibal Lecter style, is escorted into his cell, and Arnim Zola is his cellmate, and he's more than eager to propose a partnership. After all, America is a land of opportunities. Even worse when you consider that Zola recruiting Fenhoff, a man with the ability to control minds, essentially marks the beginning of Hydra's Winter Soldier program. Anyway, Season 2. The Lady in the Lake. The serial killer is not found at the episode's end, meaning he, or she, is still on the loose, and still able to strike at any time. And because of what happened with the lead detective on the case, who knows if they'll be able to ever find the killer. The real killer was actually the Zero Matter. The Lady of the Lake wasn't actually involved in the murder kicking the episode off. The real nightmare fuel was in the zero matter-induced deaths. It starts with the victims freezing objects around themselves, then icing over slowly until they die, or are brittle enough to be smashed into crystalline shards when tapped. My apologies on being unclear. I meant the serial killer from a few years ago was still out there, still lurking, not captured, no clues, and with the actual death being something different, and what happened to the lead detective, there's no one looking into what actually happened all those years ago. A view in the dark. We're introduced to zero matter, a possibly extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional substance that sucked a bunch of people and trucks into nothing upon its arrival, and which is set loose at the episode's end. Whitney Frost, who spent the entire first 2 episodes being completely smug and unflappable, is absolutely horrified when she discovers she's been infected by it. Okay, zero matter gets even scarier when Whitney accidentally kills a director who's getting fresh with her, with his body turning to black liquid which is then sucked inside her, causing the infection to grow larger. And the whole time she's completely panicked about what's happening to her, like someone from a David Cronenberg body horror film. The atomic job. Whitney Frost wants to steal an atomic bomb to recreate the zero matter experiment. What couldn't go wrong with that situation? Really, Whitney Frost in this episode descends to truly unsettling levels. 1, she can now apparently move about without Calvin noticing. 2, her voice and speech patterns now only have 2 modes. Contralto of danger and drunk on the dark side, with the transition so abrupt it can hit you. And 3, you witness how her poised and pretty facade is slowly but surely beginning to crack, combined with literal cracking at that, after a lifetime of being underestimated just because she's a woman. You know she's a victim, but you just know that with the direction she's taking, it cannot end well for her. Listening to both Whitney and Jason's dialogue, it becomes clear that whatever zero matter is, it's alive, and wants Whitney to recreate the experiment so it can return to our world. Life of the party. Another step for Ms. Frost. She didn't even have to touch those 5 guys from the council to devour them. After her front row seat to Whitney's powers in the council room, Dottie discovers she's been captured by her. For once, the eternally smug and unflappable Black Widow has no quips and no confidence and just stares in horror. Wait, so Dottie is a Black Widow. Obviously not the Black Widow, because this is supposed to be happening around World War II, and I don't think that Natasha Romanoff is that old. So does that mean that Dottie's supposed to be one of the good guys? Just snapping necks and... Okay, Whitney again. Her use of zero matter as a form of cold-blooded torture to break Dottie is alarming on every level. Really, the fact that it took her minutes says a lot about how monstrous she is. Here's a Russian spy, not just any Russian spy, but a Black Widow who has been subjected and hardened to all forms of torture since she was a little girl. Here is a woman who is a cold-blooded sociopath who has been nothing but poised and confident, even when chained up and surrounded by enemies. And she not only gets broken, she is terrified to the point of tears when Whitney inflicts her powers on her just once. There's also the fact she's so casual about shooting Anna. Calling her a cold-hearted bitch is letting her off lightly now. A little song and dance. Adding on to Whitney's long list of nightmare fuel, she really gets in touch with her inner mad scientist in this episode when she hooks Jason up to a pump in an attempt to try and suck the zero matter out of him. Jason screams, and the fact that this is being done at a rather creepy waste treatment plant doesn't help. Jason's body literally cracking and splintering as the zero matter in him fully erupts. I just want to say that it's interesting, but also a little bit weird that this show was called Agent Carter, but none of the nightmare fuel seems to have anything to do with her. For this to be a Marvel TV show about that lady with this much nightmare fuel, how has she possibly managed to avoid basically all of it? Hollywood ending. Jason reveals what he saw on the other side of the rift. Zero matter has utterly consumed everything in its home dimension. Zero matter is alive and it wants to get into Earth's dimension so that it can consume everything there. So I'm going to have to assume that either Hollywood ending is not the last episode, that there was a season 3 of Agent Carter that has no nightmare fuel in it somehow. Or they just didn't get to resolve this before ABC decided, never mind, we don't care about Agent Carter. But it sounds like Zero Matter was going to be something really important at some point that they just decided to just kind of not. Okie dokie. That brings us on to Daredevil from Netflix, which I found out has 3 seasons. I've only seen like half of 1 season. Let's see. When they said the Daredevil on Netflix was going to be darker and edgier than the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they weren't kidding. How long is this? Oh, Jesus. Okay. The rest of this episode might just be Daredevil, from the looks of it. Oh boy! In general, 2 words. Wilson Fisk. A brutal mob boss who has bought the media and half of the police for his benefit and protection. Basically, he has both the mob and the law in his possession. In Season 1, the mere mention of his name causes so much fear in his associates that they are willing to commit suicide or murder in his name. He makes it almost impossible to link criminal activity to him by having others do his dirty work for him. But don't let that fool you, because if you piss him off, he's more than a capable fighter. He's like a shadow consuming everything in its path. Season 3 Fisk in general. He essentially achieves Kilgrave levels of control over people without any supernatural abilities whatsoever. He has nigh unlimited surveillance over his targets, is able to read into people's psyche and their weaknesses, creates traps for them years in advance just in case they may become useful to him later, makes already unstable people go over the edge, and forces good upstanding citizens to do his dirty work by blackmailing them with threats against their families, stuff we've already seen him do in Season 1. As Matt repeatedly states, Fisk is 5 steps ahead over any of their plans that could harm him, having over a dozen FBI agents under his direct control, and able to threaten anyone who could testify against him and make good on that threat. He orders a complete bystander Julie killed merely because she's too much of a positive influence on Dex, and controls SAC Hatley by killing one of her kids and then threatening the other. His level of influence is completely terrifying, in part because, unlike Kilgrave, he was able to achieve this by purely mundane means. One of the most disturbing aspects of his character is how realistic the character really is. Fisk is not very different from many real criminals who have gained so much power and influence that imprisoning them was difficult while their corruption reigns lasted, such as Al Capone or Pablo Escobar. Anyway, episode 1 of Season 1. The series opens with Jack Murdock coming onto the scene of the accident and finding Matt on the ground, his face covered in unknown chemicals. Matt then starts screaming about how he can't see while Jack just holds him helpless. Adult fear in its purest form possible. James Wesley is introduced by walking up to Clyde Farnham as Farnham is having lunch in a park. Without saying a word, he sits down next to Farnham. Right off the bat, there's something very unsettling about the way Wesley presents himself. I sort of remember how Wesley composed himself. I don't know if I should bother trying to do the voice. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to at least try to get the tone. There's plenty of room over there. You mind? $28,957. Tell Rigoletto he'll get his money. Mr. Rigoletto has retired. His books have been acquired by my employer. Well, you tell him the same thing. I'd like to show you something, if you have a moment. Wesley sets down a tablet on the table. On it, a live feed of Farnham's daughter in a park. What is it about college girls and Monet t-shirts? Open composition and spontaneity reflecting this transformative time in their lives, perhaps? Or maybe they just like the color blue. Call her. Hey Dad, what's up? Hi baby, I'm just checking in. You need anything? Yeah. I actually have a ton of laundry. I was gonna swing by this weekend to use the machines and then maybe we could catch a movie after your shift? Yeah, that would be great. Look baby, I gotta go. I love you baby. I love you too. Bye Dad. Farnham hangs up, the tablet feed shifts slightly to the left, focusing on a man seated on a park bench. Now you see this man here? If we're being honest with each other, Mr. Farnham, I find his methods unpleasant. But such are the times we live in. Give us a wave, Mr. Ransel. Mr. Rance? Rance looks up at the camera and waves with his hand. I told you that I will get you the money. Such a small sum is of little interest to my employer. Your position, however, that's something we can work with. What do you want me to do? With the Union Allied scandal exposed, Fisk orders Wesley to have everyone involved killed so they can't talk. Karen's boss, McClintock, is force-fed an overdose of pills, Barnum is shot through his mouth in his basement and his death staged like a suicide, and Rance, captured after Matt thwarted his attempt to attack Karen at her apartment, is hanged in his jail cell with his bedsheets, the very fate that Farnham had originally tried to give to Karen. Madame Gao's heroin workshop operated solely by blind workers. Episode 12 reveals it is. Gao claims they did it to themselves after she showed them something. Considering that Madame Gao is one of the 5 fingers of the hand, it's even worse. Perhaps something fanatic themselves. The first people Matt fights are sex slavers who are in the middle of loading a group of kidnapped women into a shipping crate. Episode 2, Cut Man. Matt torturing Semyon for information with the assistance of a trained medical professional. To elaborate, Matt presses a sharp object through Semyon's eye socket without touching the actual eye itself and starts cutting the soft, tender parts protecting his brain. One step short of a transorbital lobotomy, which he supposedly does in order to directly stimulate the part of the brain that feels pain. And then Matt throws the guy off the roof. He lands in a dumpster and will live, but it really looks like Matt did not care if he just murdered a man. In the blood reveals that while the fall didn't kill him, the impact put the man into a coma. Episode 3, Rabbit in a Snowstorm. Healy commits suicide by impaling himself on a spike through the eye socket. The camera does not cut away, holds on afterward even. Matt's utterly horrified reaction matches the audience. Healy in general, right from the opening scene where he beats Prohaska to death with a bowling ball, it's clear just how remorseless and guilt-free he is, until he spills Whistle and Fisk's identity and he suddenly becomes a terrified wreck, prompting him to kill himself before Fisk can think of a reason to kill the people he cares about. The aforementioned opening scene involving Healy and Prohaska, specifically how, during the fight between the two, Prohaska has his arm broken and the camera ever so slightly focuses on the bone sticking out of his arm, and Healy smashing Prohaska's head in with the bowling ball, blood splattering on his face. Wesley manages to be the one without doing much for the entirety of his interaction as he hires Nelson and Murdoch to defend Healy. There's always something off about him, and in the casual way he mentions knowing Karen. I'm curious about your clientele. Do they all end up working for you after you get them off for murder, or just the pretty ones? Anyway, episode 4, In the Blood. Now that we've gotten to meet Fisk in person, he comes across as friendly, socially awkward, and a bit of a romantic with Vanessa, until Anatoly makes the mistake of crashing his date to inform him that they want to agree to Fisk's offer of support and resources. He has Wesley take Anatoly to an empty lot in Queens. As they're sitting in the car, Wesley has some ominous words that make your skin crawl. They say the past is etched in stone, but it isn't. It's smoke trapped in a closed room, swirling, changing, buffeted by the passing of years and wishful thinking, but even though our perception of it changes, one thing remains constant. The past can never be completely erased. It lingers like the scent of burning wood. At this point, Wesley's phone rings. Sir? Yes, the passenger side. What, was that him? He'd like to have a word with you. Oh, that's good. A split second later, Anatoly's door opens. Fisk reaches in, rips him from the car, and begins ferociously beating on him. Eventually, Anatoly gets an opening, pulls a switchblade and slashes at Fisk's chest to no avail, as Fisk's suits have an inner mesh lining, and one can see Fisk give a small slasher smile, knowing that the knife will do nothing. Fisk grabs Anatoly, slams him against the side of the car, and disarms him of the knife, in the process breaking Anatoly's arm. You embarrassed me! Embarrassed me in front of her! With that, Fisk continues his beatdown of Anatoly, viciously beating him into the pavement. Wesley listens in on the commotion, quietly listening into the commotion. Desperately, Anatoly tries to crawl back to the car, but can only utter defiantly to Wesley before Fisk grabs him and knocks him out. He then grabs Anatoly's body, plants his head in the doorwell, and begins bashing it in with the door. And he doesn't stop until Anatoly's head is reduced to nothing. You can actually see Anatoly's brains hitting the pavement before the head snaps clean off. This is just a reminder of what Fisk is capable of doing when he is really, really pissed off. Even though Anatoly is clearly dead after the second or third door slam, Fisk does not stop until his head is smashed off. If Fisk gets pissed off, you're not just dead, you're obliterated. Just to add emphasis to the whole scene is the blank expression Wesley has as Anatoly tries to crawl back to the car, begging for mercy. He doesn't even flinch as flecks of blood get on his suit and casually steps out of the car on the opposite side while Fisk is still smashing in Anatoly's head. Just as chilling is how Fisk composes himself as Wesley hands him a handkerchief to wipe Anatoly's blood off his face. He's already making plans to get rid of Vladimir. Tell Mr. Potter I need a new suit. What about this? Take what's left of him and send it to his brother. It'll start a war. I'm counting on it. The way the Ronchahov brothers escaped from the Gulag is gruesome in and of itself. After the guards left their dead cellmate with them to be consumed by rats, Vladimir ripped a hole in the corpse's side and fashioned one of its ribbed bones into a shiv. Episode 5, World on Fire. Did I actually finish watching Season 1? Or did I stop at a certain point? To follow up on Anatoly's brutal murder, the first thing we see after the opening credits is Fisk's mechanics washing brain matter from the doorwell with a high-pressured hose. Before the credits, we see what little is left of the body as it is delivered to Vladimir. Later, the way Vladimir washes the beaten, headless corpse is the definition of creepy. The scene when one of Madame Gao's blind workers casually strolls into Vladimir's warehouse and blows the place up just reeks of brainwashing creepiness. We learn in Season 3 that there were innocents who got killed in the bombings as Foggy encounters a woman at one campaign event who lost her husband to one of the explosions. Campaign event of what? Is Foggy running for something? Our glimpse into how Matt really views the world, aside from being a none-too-stealthy title drop. Imagine seeing the world like that for more than 10 years. Episode 6, Condemned. On Fisk's orders, an ESU sniper opens fire on Blake and the cops assembled outside the building where Matt and Vladimir are holed up. Maybe I did see the whole season. Ben is left with the duty of attending to Blake's wound using his hands to stop the bleeding. Officer Sullivan's death. The ESU team sweeping the building comes upon the room where he's been left by Matt, tied up to a column and gagged with duct tape. As they surround Sullivan, Sullivan looks relieved that help has arrived. Then one of the officers kneels down next to him and says into his radio, "Officer Sullivan is dead. I say again, Officer Sullivan is dead." Sullivan's face turns to shock as the officer promptly produces a small knife and plunges it into his throat and carves it open. Sullivan bleeds to death, the blank and emotionless look on the face of the SU officer, who has his goggles lowered and a balaclava covering the lower half of his face, but the last thing he ever sees. Episode 7, Stick. I'm honestly not sure if I saw the whole season. I know so far I've seen episodes 7 and 8, so I've seen at least that far. And then I think I lost access to my Netflix account. By the time I got Netflix again, all of these things had been canceled. But, Matt tells Stick that due to his enhanced sense of touch, cotton sheets feel like sandpaper. This implies that Matt feels injuries far more intimately than the average human being, which is especially horrifying given how often and how badly Matt is injured on a regular basis. The revelation of what Black Sky is. Just a boy. When Matt confronts Stick on it, Matt insists that he could hear the boy's heart. He was scared. However, Stick insists that what Matt saw wasn't a boy, but a weapon who was the bringer of darkness. Given that Season 2 reveals that Stick is fighting a war against the Hand, this opens up some disturbing possibilities on what Black Sky was supposed to bring. More so after Electro has ultimately revived as their Black Sky. Episode 8, Shadows in the Glass. After losing the council election, Bill Fisk decides to go confront Bernie Walker, a kid who was knocking down Bill's signs and who assaulted Wilson. After a bit of back and forth, he begins beating on Bernie and then makes Wilson join in. What's worse, Fisk killing his abusive dad with a hammer or his mother sawing him to pieces after the fact to dispose of the body. Keep kicking him! Keep kicking him! Episode 9, Speak of the Devil. Nobu's fight with Matt is incredibly brutal. Summed up by stabbing him and then using the chain attached to the blade to drag Matt along the floor, trailing blood the entire way. Nobu catching fire and burning alive at the end of the fight. All the more so because he doesn't make a sound and still throws a couple of kicks. And as Season 2 reveals, it doesn't kill him, or rather it doesn't keep him down. Okay, so I think the last episode I saw was episode 8 then. Because I don't remember the Nobu thing, and I definitely don't... I don't think I remember episode 10. Let's find out. Okay, we finally learned what drove Matt over the edge to becoming a vigilante. He heard an abusive dad who then escaped conviction because his wife refused to believe it. Some people believe that the man was a child molester, although nothing indicates that there is such evidence of this, although it does not make it any less terrible than it already is. The way Matt finally beats down the man for his crimes is chilling. He turns the guy's face into a red pulp with an unending barrage of brutal punches and a frustrated scream that's downright feral. The man spent the next month eating out of a straw. Okay, episode 12. The Ones We Leave Behind. All of the blind heroin workers turn on Matt and swarm him like they were zombies. For what it's worth, Matt's reaction plays into it well, since he's both frightened by their unexpected reaction and confused since he doesn't know how to handle the situation without hurting them, all the while pleading that he's there to help. Ben Urich's death. Yeah, I definitely didn't get this far, because I didn't know Ben Urich dies. Ben returns home with his cardboard box of unemployment, and as he begins typing at his computer, the camera slowly pivots around his head to reveal Fisk sitting in an armchair behind Ben. The resulting conversation is very tense, with it unclear if or when hell is about to break loose. The breaking point is when Fisk asks Ben if he killed Wesley, something Ben knows nothing about. Yes, I didn't think so. You're a man of principle, of conviction. I can understand that. I even admire it. But you went after my mother. That's not something I can forgive. I wrote a lot of stories in my years pushing ink. You know how many times people have threatened me to get me to keep my mouth shut? But that's my mother that you brought into this, Mr. Urich. My mother! So I am not here to threaten you. I am here to kill you. Fisk lunges at Ben from the chair he's been sitting at, throws him to the ground, and chokes the life out of him. Fisk slashes smile as Ben dies. The fact that it's the last thing Ben ever sees makes it worse. Okay? Episode 13, Daredevil. Fisk's murder of Owlsley by throwing him down an elevator shaft. Fisk already knows that Owlsley is stealing from him, and the conversation convinces him that Owlsley had conspired with Madame Gao over the benefit poisonings. It had seemed that Owlsley had managed to outmaneuver Fisk into letting him go using Hoffman as leverage. Fisk even seems to be considering it, but that temper we've come to expect erupts when Fisk realizes what really makes him angry about the whole affair. You hurt her! You hurt Vanessa! Shoves Leland down an elevator shaft. It seems like finally the tables are turning for Fisk with this episode. At long last, every single rat that has been on his payroll has been named and is being rooted out. Nope! He still has a few more up his sleeve, including one of the FBI guards in the truck with him. Fisk really does have eyes everywhere. There's a civilian that has the misfortune of being nearby the rescue attempt on Fisk. Imagine that you're driving home or running a late errand when all of a sudden people in full body armor and wielding assault rifles begin opening fire. Okay. Season 2. In general, meet Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, who finally gets to show off some of the Tarantino-esque violence of the comics on screen. Killing you is the least he could do with you if you're lucky. To clarify, he not only murders his victims, but also tortures them and leaves them in horrible agony. Sure, his victims are just gangsters and criminals, but that doesn't take away the fact that the man is a brutal, bloodthirsty killing machine to the extent that even Fisk is surprised at his effectiveness. Basically, he is less a man and more an unstoppable force that leaves waves of murder. Okay, that was the end general. Episode 1, bang! The whole sequence with Frank Castle stalking Grotto and Karen in the hospital. The whole scene practically plays like the Terminator's massacre of the West Highland police station, with the Punisher as the T-800, Karen is Kyle Reese, and Grotto is Sarah Connor. The guy's always walking, but always seems to be right behind Karen. And then, when the two are getting away in Karen's car, Fisk is on the roof with a sniper, getting ready to take the shot. Why was he after Karen? Was it a Fisk thing, or was he just angry at her for some reason? The Irish Mob Massacre. One moment, you and your buddies are just sitting around raising a toast to future business in Hell's Kitchen. The next, you're all being gunned down by someone outside with a machine gun who you can't even see. In the aftermath, when the police are looking at the mess, the camera does a nice track through the giant through-and-through bullet wound that one of the bodies received, and we see that another guy got his hand clean sawed off. It's gonna take weeks to process this shit, and where's this asshole's hand? And right after the massacre, Nesbitt's phone rings, causing his Irish washerwoman ringtone to play. It feels surreal listening to it echo over the bloody carnage. Matt overhears one of the detectives commenting that the shooter was using armor-piercing ammunition so strong that the Kevlar vest the victims were wearing turned out to be useless. Matt walks inside a butcher warehouse and finds nothing but bodies of criminals that Castle has hanged and executed, with one of them looking partially disemboweled. Worse, one of them is still alive, probably not the disemboweled guy. 3 words. It's one man! Because up until now, the gory nature of these attacks on the Irish mob, the Dogs of Hell, and the Mexican cartel is such that Matt and the NYPD have been led to believe it's the work of a group of trained killers. The big reveal that all of those murders were committed by a single man. How the first fight between Matt and Frank ends. Just as Matt has knocked Frank down and is about to keep going, Frank whips out a pistol from an ankle holster. Bang! With one word, and the only thing he says in the whole episode, Frank shoots him in the helmet, sending him over the roof's edge. Dogs to a gunfight. When Matt loses his hearing due to his concussion. First, everything seems louder than ever before, causing him to drop a glass of water. Then we see the glass shatter, but we don't hear it. The panicked look on Matt's face says it all, even getting worse as he starts to scream out and we still can't hear anything. Imagine how terrifying it will be to have already gone blind and then be struck deaf on top of it. Thankfully, it's only temporary, but he had no way of knowing that when it happened. Especially for Matt Murdock, where his hearing is heavily implied to be the primary means by which he navigates the world and what allows him to operate as Daredevil. For the full effect of this, turn on the audio description and close your eyes. It's incredibly eerie when the sound of the show suddenly cuts out and you're left with just the narrator describing Matt's reaction. Inaudible. Inaudible. When the Punisher kills people in this show, or his own, it's all screaming ferocity, but when he murders the sleazy pawnshop clerk who tries to sell him child pornography, he's completely silent. Just the eerily calm, methodical way he closes the store and picks up the bat to kill him with is chilling, even if the guy deserved it. The fact that we don't see the impact adds to it. Also, full props for Jon Bernthal being terrifying through body language. Frank showing up at a Dogs of Hell garage. It starts with the guy with the headphones cleaning the blood out of the truck cabin, then, after a few brief moments, we hear shouts and shots fired, but the cleaning guy doesn't notice until one of the men collapses against the truck. The guy turns, the song he's listening to becomes the background music, and then Frank steps into shot, shotgun in hand and his eyes cold and dead. Round 2 of Matt vs. Frank, which ends about as well for the former as the first fight did. Everything seems to go fine until the two fall through a skylight. As Matt struggles to get up, Frank steps across the broken glass, unknowingly causing Matt's concussion to act up. As Matt staggers, trying to keep control, Frank slowly closes in. Episode 3, New York's Finest. Frank Castle, at first, doesn't seem quite as intimidating as his deeds would have you believe, having a cup of joe and making small talk. Eventually, the conversation between them gets more and more heated until Matt gets fed up and calls him a nutjob. You can feel the white-hot rage emanating off of Frank and hear the fear in Matt's voice. What do you say? You're unhinged, Frank. That's right, Frank's rage was so powerful it managed to, if only for a moment, scare the man without fear. Who puts a scare into Frank when he bashed his berserk button and attempted to force Matt into making a sadistic choice between taking a life and letting another die? Matt escapes his chains by taking a third option and charges Frank with a look of absolute rage on his face. Frank's expression says it all. Okay, let me see if I understand this right. So, Daredevil's the man without fear, but he was afraid because he could feel the rage coming off of Frank. But then he turned around and scared Frank because he was like, hey, you gotta kill that person or let that person die. And then he got out of his chains and charged Frank, and Frank just like, let's see. Oh crap. I should probably watch this at some point if I can. I don't even know if it's still on Netflix or not. I know they canceled it, but I don't know if they deleted it. Anyway, episode 4, Penny and Dime. Finn Cooley, an Irish mobster who was the father of one of the criminals Frank killed in the Mob Massacre, stabs a fellow associate in the eye with an ice pick, as one does, during the funeral ceremony after saying that death was just a natural part of their business. Frank gets perforated with a power drill by the Irish mobsters during his cold-blooded torture. For animal lovers, Finn threatening to go double of everything he's done to Frank to the abused pit bull Frank rescued will strike a chord, particularly Frank's horrified and desperate reaction to that threat. Thankfully the pit bull is fine, but still, wow. Though the bastard really had it coming, Finn's death was really messy and detailed. Though we thankfully don't get to see it, the death of Frank's family is described in very grisly detail, with him holding his dead daughter with meat spilling out of her face after being shredded by gunfire. Semper Fidelis. Episode ends with Matt and Elektra finding a massive hole dug in the floor of the future site of Midland Circle. Matt throws Elektra's flashlight down the hole and listens for it to hit the ground. A good 8 seconds go by before Elektra asks if it has hit the ground yet, and Matt says it hasn't. She waits a few more seconds and asks for him to let her know when it does. The episode ends before we ever hear it hit the ground. By the time the episode ends, the flashlight has been falling for almost 20 seconds. For reference, a penny dropped from the top of the Empire State Building takes about 9 seconds to hit the ground. Assuming that a flashlight is affected by gravity and air resistance in a roughly similar enough manner to a penny, then the hole they have dug is more than twice as deep as the Empire State Building is tall. The Defenders reveals the pit is 400 feet deep. Episode 8, Guilty as Sin. Elektra is poisoned in the opening by a hand ninja, and the healing process administered by Stick to save her is unpleasant as it sounds like, cracking open a hole in Elektra's abdomen and directly pumping the boiling cure into it. I'm gonna make her worse before I can make her better. Frank Castle's outburst is quite the awesome I am what I am speech, but awesome as it is, it's also every bit as terrifying, especially when you take into account Nelson and Murdoch's efforts to get him out alive, as well as Karen's assertion that Frank originally wanted to clear himself as he was beginning to show in the previous episodes, because as it turns out, Fisk has made him an offer he can't refuse. Off the top of my head, I don't know Jon Bernthal's voice, but I can read the quote. Those people, the ones I put down, the people I killed, I want you to know that I'd do it all again. This is a circus, alright? It's a charade. It's an act. It's bullshit about how crazy I am. I ain't crazy. I'm not crazy, okay? I know what I did. I know who I am, and I do not need your help. I'm smack dab in the middle of my right goddamn mind, and any scumbag, any lowlife, any maggot piece of shit that I put down, I did it because I liked it. Hell, I loved it. I'm sitting here, I'm just itching. I'm itching to do it again. And you think what? You think you're going to send me to a nut house? Some doctor? They're going to get me to stop doing what I want to do? Well, that ain't happening. Not on my watch. You people, you call me the Punisher. Ain't that right? The big bad Punisher. Well, here I am. You want it? You got it. I am the Punisher. I'm right here. You want it? I'll give it to you. And anybody who came here today to hear me whine, to hear me beg, well, you can kiss my ass. Do you hear me? I'm guilty. Come on, please, Judge. I'm guilty. You hear me? I'm guilty. I'm guilty. I'll kill every one of them. I'll kill every single one. Elektra slitting the ninja's throat without the benefit of a gory discretion shot, and he was just a kid. Dang. Alright, so anyway, episode 9, 7 Minutes in Heaven. After the scene in the previous episode, Matt calls Elektra out on what she did and how, once again, she enjoyed it. She still tries to brush it off as a self-defense, but after Matt keeps challenging her, she reveals a horrible truth. She murdered her first person when she was 12, and for no other reason than to see if she could. It's the moment that confirms to Matt and the audience that while there is some good in Elektra, Stick largely turned her into a cold-blooded sadist and borderline sociopath. Frank Castle's attack on Dutton immediately followed by his savage takedown of the inmates. To amplify this, remember Matt taking down the Russians in the hallway or the dogs of hell in the stairwell? Difference is Frank doesn't spare his enemies. He beats nearly half of them unconscious, and the others? He drives a broken stick through a guy's chest, snaps another's neck, another guy's head open with a hatchet, and for the finish, gouges out a man's eye and slits his throat to the point where his head nearly comes off. By the end of it all, Frank's face is bathed in blood, and there is a skull-shaped bloodstain on his uniform. Dutton's slowly dying on the operating table as his lungs fill up with blood, and Fisk sits there calmly gloating about his triumph. Episode 10, The Man in the Box. While DA Ray's death by assassination through a ton of firepower was pretty much in the making, plus her death was virtually papered over by subsequent events, it's hard not to scratch off her going out with eyes wide open, the fact that she was basically begging for forgiveness in order to keep her daughter safe, and the fact that Matt, Karen, and Foggy could have been turned into salsa with her, Foggy actually sustaining an injury. Let's see. Matt goes to see Fisk and threatens to have Vanessa barred from ever entering the United States if he doesn't confess his coercing Frank Castle to make a guilty plea. Fisk then snaps his handcuffs, grabs Matt, slams him into the table like a rag doll, and holds him up to his face with contemptuous ease. Speak her name again! Go ahead! Matt punches him and Fisk slams into the table again. Yes, the son of a boxer! You were running this place. Yeah, you did set him free. You ask such small questions, Mr. Murdoch. I know you're regaining power in here. Yes, ask my lawyer. He'll deny it. Ask the guards. They'll deny it. Ask the inmates here. They'll cut their tongues out before they talk. But I have something to say to you. When I finally get out of this cage, I will dismantle the lives of the two amateurs that put me in here. You, Mr. Murdoch, and Franklin Percy Nelson. I put you here, not Nelson. I did. The two of you took the laurels. You'll both take the blame. I'll chop both the heads off that snake, and I'll spend more than $6 on postage to bring you down. You see, I had a lot of time to reflect on my journey here, Mr. Murdoch. My mistakes, everything I took for granted, while I try and sleep in this bleak place. The one thing that keeps me warm is the thought that I will look down upon this city, the city that birthed me, with the woman that I love, whom I love with everything that I am. If you're worried that Frank Castle will wreak havoc on Hell's Kitchen, throws Matt back into his seat, just wait. And this is one of the last appearances in his last appearances in this season, denying us any kind of catharsis by reminding us his current relative lack of power. Plus, at the end of the episode, Fisk feels his split lip, the only blow Matt managed to land during the above scene while being throttled, contemplates it for a moment, and then demands to be brought his file on Matt. He's ready to declare a war on Matt for his threats, something that he makes clear the first time he ever contacts Matt in Season 3. The last time we spoke, you threatened me. That is something I cannot forgive. I don't even know what tone he used for any of that. All I know I can hear in my brain from years back the way he sounds when he's angry, and it sounds like he's angry every time he shows up on screen in season 2. So, The audience knows that this is Matt versus Fisk, so the fact that Fisk so easily overpowers him is a fearsome display of strength and power, except that Matt isn't there in costume, and Fisk has no idea who he's really dealing with. Which means Fisk just pulled out his full strength to beat up a civilian blind man, which is somehow more terrifying. Just before Fisk snaps his handcuffs, he is snarling at Matt, showing that Fisk is still just an angry thug that will kill you if you push his buttons. The scene where Claire Temple sees the kids controlled by the Hand standing there motionless with a dead body to their feet, which happens to be the father of one of the kids no less. Then they slowly look up at her, while the alarm blares and the hallway lights continue to flicker on and off, Nosferatu. The moment during the diner shootout that's worth paying attention to. There's a moment during the diner shootout that's worth paying attention to. At the point when Frank is stabbing the one guy repeatedly with a knife, the scene cuts to Karen taking cover, and she covers her mouth in horror while listening to the stabbing. That one shot drives home the realism and brutality, that the Punisher is not a hero. He is a monster who destroys other monsters. If you didn't have the context of the scene, you'd think Karen was hiding from a villain. I probably wasn't going to put ads on this anyway, so might as well check out the clip and then have Disney or Netflix or whoever get mad at me for it. Okay. The entire YouTube account has been terminated. I guess it's a good thing I didn't get that clip then, because they probably would have just shut down my whole channel, which would suck. Alright. Episode 12, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel. It's very hard to watch and not wince at Stick being tortured by the Hand through having tiny bamboo sticks being inserted under his fingernails very slowly. Even if, based on Stick's remarks to Alexandra and the Defenders when she captures him, he probably planned to get captured. Let's see. Episode 13, A Cold Day in Hell's Kitchen. In his attempt at putting down Nobu, who just killed Elektra inadvertently, Matt has essentially broken his rule by throwing Nobu off the building and had no idea Nobu would survive this. Stick was eventually the one who finished him. In fact, Season 2 had been all about Matt's struggle with the desire to kill and his deep religious belief against killing. Frank Castle challenged him on a real-world practical level. He dealt with the issue of how the justice system is simply not able to handle these criminals and how the police simply can't stop them from hurting innocent people. Elektra challenged Matt on a personal level. She dealt with the fact that Matt actually enjoys beating the shit out of people. Remember what Matt said at the very beginning of the show about letting the devil out? Elektra is always unrestrained, and she brings that side out in Matt. The Season 2 finale was the culmination of the conflict. Matt let the devil out and confirmed Frank Castle's "you're one bad day away from being me" remark from earlier in the season. The stinger of the series is the Hand robbing Elektra's corpse and beginning the resurrection process. The Defender shows the rest of the resurrection process in full detail. Season 3. Matt's dark new outlook throughout Season 3. A man who has gone through hardship after hardship, endured tragedy after tragedy, who has only kept his resolve due to his faith, which he basically loses in the beginning, finally hits his breaking point after seemingly losing everything. The season goes to show how terrifying Matt can be when he has basically nothing to lose, and as he resorts to more and more brutal methods to get at Fisk and kill him. In short, this is what Frank meant when he said that Matt was one really bad day away from becoming just like him. Benjamin Dex Poindexter. A born psychopath with improbable aiming skills. It's Bullseye. As a 12-year-old, he kills his baseball coach, who was not only constantly kind to him, but encouraged his talents, all because Coach Bradley wouldn't let him finish pitching a game, which in itself was only so other kids could get a chance to play. He is then assigned a therapist, Dr. Eileen Mercer, who quickly diagnoses him with borderline personality disorder, psychopathic tendencies, and a significant lack of empathy, as he admits to not feeling any remorse for killing his coach, and he believed he deserved it for benching him. As an adult, Dex becomes an FBI agent who has a constant record of using lethal force. When saving Fisk from being killed, he knowingly murders 2 hitmen who were already surrendering, then uses ejected gun clips as daggers to kill another group. Fisk, seeing his potential, begins to subtly manipulate Dex into becoming his personal The Dragon, with his first assignment being massacring a good chunk of the staff at the Bulletin while wearing Matt's Daredevil suit, before killing off Jasper Evans. A tormented, sociopathic monster who enjoys killing, Dex is easily one of the most terrifying villains of the MCU. Something particularly scary about him is that no reason is given for him to present such a threat. Sure, his accuracy is explained, and while Matt might have the edge in hand-to-hand combat, the gap isn't nearly as wide as it should be. Matt was trained by the Chase and was shown to match the Iron Fist, the Black Sky, and any of the Five Fingers. He should be able to make short work of someone who supposedly only has the standard training of a soldier or an FBI agent, but Dex always beats him. The implication being that he's such an inexplicably awesome, perfect killing machine just because he's meant to be, and his violence, focus, and insanity allowed him to be so. Even worse, Dex tries to be good, clings to anything and everything he can to keep himself from becoming the complete, unrepentant, unstoppable monster he knows he can be. And Fisk methodically takes away every pillar that props up Dex's failing morality. Eventually, Dex just gives up and embraces his utter amorality to the point that even Fisk is left worried. Episode 1, Resurrection. Much like when Matt lost his hearing when he got shot by Frank, the audio makes us feel what Matt is going through as he's lost partial hearing in his right ear. Episode 2, Please. That stuff about people becoming savages in prison from Season 2? Let's see it again, this time with Jasper Evans shanking Fisk for snitching. Jasper Evans has been paid by Fisk to shank him as part of his plan to manipulate the FBI, but that makes some other things about the scene terrifying in retrospect. After Jasper shanks Fisk, Fisk overpowers and pins him to the ground with a barbell, and while in hindsight, it looks like he's about to bludgeon him to death with a giant weight, ostensibly so that Jasper can't testify to being paid off. Ultimately, Fisk settles for dropping the weight on the floor a few feet away from Jasper's head. Of course, Fisk is putting on a show to create a false paper trail in case anyone questions how he got out of prison, but we don't know how much information Jasper was told beyond shank Wilson Fisk non-fatally and make it look like he's being targeted for snitching and you'll be spirited out of the prison. If that's all he was told, then the terrified look on his face is likely because he thinks Fisk is reneging on the payment he was promised. The sequence that introduces Dex involves Fisk's FBI convoy being ambushed, like in the Season 1 finale. But this time it's not one of his own making, but rather is the Albanians that want revenge on Fisk for ratting them out. The entire scene plays out from Fisk's point of view. He's left trapped in his car, hanging upside down by his shackles, and can only watch as the Albanians gun down his FBI escorts outside. Fisk frantically tries to break the bolt linking his restraints to the floor, succeeding after a struggle. By the time Dex emerges out of nowhere to kill the assailants, the attackers are already preparing to saw the doors off of Fisk's car. It's also rare to see Fisk looking terrified, because while Jasper Evans' shanking was planned, this is the one variable in his carefully orchestrated release plan that he didn't plan for. And if not for Dex's intervention, Fisk could have died. We get a brief moment establishing Dex's ruthlessness when he uses a disassembled gun parts as daggers to kill a pair of assailants who are actively surrendering. The Albanians that Fisk snitched on apparently have all the markings of a very ruthless bunch, which makes it no wonder why Fisk picked them of all people to sell to Nadim, among other reasons. You're right, Wilson Fisk is a piece of shit. After every time I'm in the room with a guy, I want to shower. But let's talk about the Albanians for a minute. What they've done. 4 dead NYPD officers, 12 more riding desks with disabilities, 107 civilian murders, and even after 5 task forces over 7 years to the tune of $11 million, we got 0. Those are some shitty numbers. But here's another one. With Fisk's intel, we beheaded that Albanian syndicate in 1 day. 1 single day. No loss of life, no injuries, and no mayhem. Episode 3, No Good Deed. Matt's way of going after Fisk is to go after Big Ben Donovan. On the one hand, it's nice to wipe the smugness off his face, but on the other hand, it's also kind of creepy as Matt basically hides in the backseat of Big Ben's car and chokes him from behind when he gets in to pressure him into revealing why Fisk flopped on the Albanians. Episode 4, Blindsided. How much long-term planning does Fisk have? He comes up with an elaborate scheme just on the off chance that one of the lawyers who put him away visits the prison. His loyal guards and inmates lure Matt into an exam room where the nurse then proceeds to inject Matt with a sedative. While Matt is catching his breath after disarming the nurse, Fisk calls the phone in the room. You're not Franklin Nelson. Fisk, it's quite something to see. For a blind man, you have a very impressive reflexes, Mr. Murdoch. What was I injected with? Do you remember the last time that we spoke? Matt faces the camera and nods slowly, knowing Fisk is referring to their exchange from after Castle's escape. You said that for the cost of postage, you could prevent my reunion with the only person who gives my life meaning. The only person that I love. And I would have let bygones be bygones. But you didn't just threaten me. You threatened Vanessa, and that is something that I cannot forgive. Listen to me very carefully. There's a click as Fisk abruptly hangs up. Next thing Matt knows, he's being ambushed by about half a dozen inmates working for Fisk. While he manages to fight them all off, it is quite a brutal struggle for him. Then he has to take down two dirty guards, negotiate with Vic Jasufi, and have one of Vic's men disguise himself as a guard to escort Matt out through a chaotic riot set off by Fisk's men. The sedatives take effect and Matt passes out just as he gets back in the cab. It doesn't end there. When Matt comes around, he finds out the driver who brought him there has been replaced by another of Fisk's henchmen. Seconds later, the driver bails out, and the driverless cab drives into the water, taking Matt with it. The tone in Fisk's voice when Matt answers the phone implies that he was expecting Foggy to be there, not Matt. It's chilling to think that everything that happens in this set piece wasn't something Fisk had planned for Matt, but for Foggy, someone with none of Matt's fighting prowess. Okay. Dex's start of darkness. He killed his coach by hitting him in the head with a baseball over pulling him from the game. His idea of taking down a suicidal man is to suggest that the guy murdered his stepfather. Fisk's manipulation of Nadim has gone so well that he's able to convince Nadim that Matt is an accomplice and Nadim will run with it without looking too closely at Matt's background. Felix Manning is able to spook Karen, a woman not easily intimidated, by revealing intimate details about the house she grew up in and how he knows all about her dark and troubled past. He then adds that he doesn't fix problems, he makes them disappear. Episode 6, The Devil You Know. Getting close to the end. Fisk knew his plan to strike back at the people who put him away. He sends Dex in a Daredevil costume to attack Karen at the Bulletin. Dex enters and immediately kills several reporters and maims a few others. Matt shows up, narrowly stopping Dex from killing Foggy with a baton, and takes a moment to size up his foe. He is disturbed by the realization that Dex is dressed as him. Who the hell are you? I'm Daredevil. As Matt and Dex fight each other all over the newsroom, whenever Matt is up close, he gains the upper hand. Whenever there's any distance, Matt just uses whatever office supplies are in reach as weapons. A cat-and-mouse game of hide-and-seek results in some crazy trick shots that keep knocking Matt around. Finally, Matt uses a false target or two to get in close and goes for the knockout. He almost wins, but Dex reaches for a nearby supply of scissors, which he tosses into Matt's collarbone. Matt goes down and Dex drops a supply shelf on him and knocks him out with a brutal kick to the face. Dex then proceeds to break into the office where Karen, Foggy, Ellison, and Jasper are hiding. He manages to very quickly overpower Foggy, disarms Karen of her gun, stabs Ellison with a pencil, and finally shoots Jasper in the head with Karen's gun. Hello, Karen. It's nice to see you again. I don't know what he sounds like because I've not seen that season. Episode 7, Aftermath. Right out of Born Again, we get a scene of Fisk sitting in a dark room full of TV monitors reporting on the attack, and a psychotic smirk forming on his face as he admires the success of Dex's work. Just how well thought out has Fisk planned his gambit to frame Matt? He's predicted that Matt would go to Melvin as soon as he realized who made the suit, and had Melvin make a second suit for Matt to be caught with, and had an FBI SWAT team stationed right outside for when Matt shows up. So, episode 8. The Upstairs Downstairs. The nightmare Karen had of Fisk in her apartment coming to kill her after she killed Wesley was terrifying enough. But it was just foreshadowing the inevitable. Her decision to confront Fisk directly and provoke him into trying to kill her would violate his parole. The atmosphere of the scene is best described by Deborah Ann Wolfe. Okay, I killed his best friend. He doesn't know it yet. That's a good thing. It was funny. They kept saying, play the paranoia. We definitely want to work up the paranoia. It's not paranoia if it's real. If he's really going to kill you if he finds out, that's not paranoia. That's real fear. We definitely play with that. I finally got to do a scene with Vincent, and it was fantastic. We were both so excited because he killed my Ben Urich, and I killed his James Wesley, so we have a mutual hate, I guess. Very Shakespearean mutual disgust for each other, but as actors, I think we both have tremendous respect for each other, and the opportunity to get to play with him in this brilliantly flamboyant performance he gives, which is very much a contrast to Karen, so it was great to get both of those energies in a room and see how they play off each other. It was a great day. There was like a snowstorm out when we shot it. Felt very much like we were stuck in this little soundstage. The winds were roaring outside, emotions roaring inside. It was cool. Kudos to Deborah Ann Wolfe for how menacing and scary she can sound as she brings up Wesley's death. Even it pales to Fisk's rage. He died quickly, if you were wondering. Didn't suffer much. You see, Wilson, Matt Murdock isn't the person you should be worried about. I killed Wesley. I shot him 7 times because the clip ran out. He deserved more! Fisk unleashes a scream of primal fury ready to tear her apart. When Fisk gets angry, it's usually like a spark. As seen in cases like Anatoly's death, it goes off, does its thing for a brief moment, and then disappears. Here, We see Fisk just fuming with rage as Karen gloats to him about her killing of Wesley, and when he gets up, you almost really believe he's about to kill Karen just like he did Ben. But unfortunately, the FBI comes in and escorts her out thanks to Foggy's arrival. Foggy later points out that if her plan had worked, it's very likely the agents would not have made it in time to save her from Fisk. Karen doesn't say anything to counter this. It's worse than that. We later learn that the FBI guards are already in Fisk's pocket, so it's likely that if not for Foggy's intervention, Fisk would have beaten Karen to death, then had them get rid of the body, and maybe do with her body what he does to Julie. Fisk's murder of Julie Barnes. It comes into this because of its detached, inhuman depiction. We see it all unfold as Fisk watches it on a video camera he had installed in her apartment. She arrives home, finds two handymen in her hallway, and gets half a question out before she's shot in the head. No build-up, no drama, just alive to dead in a handful of seconds. Then the guys proceed to wrap her in plastic for removal like it's nothing, like they're cleaning up a normal painting job and nothing else, as Felix Manning picks up Julie's phone and flashes it to the camera. Equally chilling is Fisk's non-reaction to watching it all. There's nothing but cold satisfaction in his eyes the whole time. The scene rams home just how terrifying Fisk's influence has become, how ubiquitous, and just how little he values human life. Julie became a problem to him, so he killed her, the same way anyone else would swat a fly. And how did he know? Because he has Mrs. Shelby hack the security camera feed from a coffee shop Dex and Julie met in, which is the sole reason he orders her killed. She had a single meeting with Dex, promised him nothing other than she would talk to him, and so he decides she has to die. That's how easy it is to get on Fisk's bad side, and you'll never know you are until it's too late. To make things worse, in the finale episode, we see Fisk has literally put Julie's body in a freezer, and the bodies of the two hitmen hired to kill her. No loose ends. Episode 9, Revelations. Ray meets up with Agent Hatley and her supervisor to out Dex and Fisk manipulations, except Dex is not the only agent working for Fisk. Hatley is too. And that's only apparent when Hatley suddenly picks up Ray's gun and shoots Wynn to death with it. Hatley, in fake distress, "No, Ray, put the gun down, please!" stops recording. "Damn you, Ray. You bring this into my house? My home?" Points Ray's gun at him. "Sit down! Sit!" Ray sits down slowly, shaking uncontrollably. Felix Manning emerges from the basement and enters the room with an evidence baggie. Bags up. "Your prints, your weapon, the recording. Do I need to explain to you what this means?" Ray stares at Felix wide-eyed. "Answer my question, please. Do you understand your situation now?" "Ray, you get this?" "Yeah, boss. I understand." "I'm not your boss anymore. Wilson Fisk is." And on rewatch, you realize that there are several glaring red flags that tell you something bad's going to happen. The room is all covered in plastic like it's a kill room, just like with Julie. Now blackmailed, the Dean walks into a conference room and finds it of terrified-looking FBI agents. He blanches, and the music takes on a very ominous note as he and the audience realize that, with the exception of Dex, every agent in this room is being blackmailed by Fisk in some way, and all of them, Dex included, are following Fisk's agenda, not the FBI's. "I don't believe it. Fisk got something on all of you? Erinori?" "Better we don't talk about it, and in here, we don't even say his name." "That's one of the rules, Ray. We only refer to him by his code name." "What code name?" "Kingpin." How did Hatley get mixed up in all this? Fisk killed one of her kids. In fact, she's been in his pocket for so long that not even close colleagues like Ray, who's worked for her for the last 10 years, remember that she used to have 2 kids. So what was it? Money? I've known you for 10 years, for Christ's sake. Shut your goddamn mouth! Or what? You'll frame me for another murder? Keep your head forward. There's no mics in here, but you know they're watching. You murdered Wynn. How do you live with that? I killed him to save your life. That's right. This is on you. I didn't tell you to break into Dex's apartment. I would have stopped you, and you wouldn't be here. But here you are. I can't believe you want this. We made this happen. We can find a way to end it. There's no way out, Ray. Fisk had you marked for more than a year. What do you mean, had me marked? Why do you think your sister-in-law lost health coverage? He made you desperate for this job. You did everything you could to get him this penthouse, get him everything he asked for. Like I said, there's no way out. We're out of our league here. They exit the elevator on the floor where Fisk's secret war room is. You could have gone to Homeland Security or the NYPD. Not take me down with you, not murder an agent. You make a report. You get your family somewhere safe. That's not an option with Fisk. I used to have 2 children, Ray. They made it look like a hit and run. I got a divorce. Maybe that keeps them a little safer, but they're still Allie's, so think about Seema and Sammy, and do what Fisk tells you. Remember how in the season 1 finale it was sort of hinted that Fisk had an FBI higher up in his back pocket who was responsible for giving his men the necessary information to ambush his convoy and attempt to free him? Well, this conversation pretty much establishes that Hatley was probably that insider. And as it turns out, Fisk has managed to manipulate Foggy for a good amount of time using the same moves he's used to manipulate Nadeem. He directed the suppliers to stop doing business with the shop, causing them to lose money and end up in a financial ruin, where Theo would be unable to get a loan from any of the banks because he didn't have enough collateral. Then Fisk had Red Lion swoop in to the rescue and give Theo some crooked financial advice and trick him into being creative with his books to secure a loan. It's bad enough to put Theo in prison, and even worse is that Fisk managed to get Foggy's parents to also sign the loan. Thanks to Fisk taking advantage of Foggy's family's desperation, Foggy either has to bow out of the DA race or see his family go to jail. You can hear Foggy cursing under his breath at the mere mention of the Red Lion. Fisk arranges a meeting with all of the rival crime lords. One particularly mouthy one, Everett Starr, protests the 20% protection tax Fisk wants to impose on all of them. Dex promptly walks in, wearing his Daredevil suit, and beats him in the forehead with a baton. It's a subtle but intimidating show of power that Fisk has even got Daredevil working for him. Star's body falls face forward on a table as blood pools around the table from the fresh wound, Fisk calmly looks at the blood and down at his own hands. The tax is now 25%. Karen, a lesser one, but the surprise car crash sentence of Karen's car accident. She's taken her eyes off the road to look at Kevin, only for Kevin to shout, "Watch out!" Karen looks back in time for the car to hit a guardrail, launch into the air, then flip over 3 times before coming to rest on its roof. Karen is briefly knocked out by the impact while Kevin is instantly killed. Dex's entry to the church as he prepares to attack Karen. He looks like a character from a horror movie, tapping his baton on the sides of the pews as he advances towards the pulpit. Where is Karen Page? When Karen finally does reveal herself, as Dex begins attacking innocent parishioners to lure her out of hiding, he uses the exact same, "Hello, Karen, it's nice to see you again," line he used in the bulletin attack. Episode 11, Reunion. Remember what Fisk did to Anatoly? Well, we get a repeat of that. He's in the back of the car with Agent Weller after the visit to Miss Phelps Brownstone, and Weller gets a phone call that Karen has been arrested by the NYPD per Nadeem's call. Fisk then calmly asks Weller for his jacket. Weller obliges, as he and the audience wonder exactly what Fisk is doing. Then Fisk abruptly throws the jacket over Weller's head and beats him to death, punching him in the face repeatedly until blood is leaking through the jacket. Pull over, get rid of the body. Episode 12, One Last Shot. It turns out that behind Fisk's back, Dex has gone to Miss Phelps Brownstone, killed her, and stolen the rabbit in a snowstorm painting. A spot of blood on the edge of the frame is all we and Fisk need to see to know exactly what happened. It becomes clear to Fisk that Dex has gotten to a point where he has become a liability, more so when Dex introduces himself to Vanessa claiming to be the new James Wesley. Like in the Season 1 finale, some civilians have the misfortune of being nearby when Fisk's men ambush the police van that is carrying Matt and Nadeem to the courthouse. Imagine being stuck in a traffic jam when people with automatic guns begin opening fire all around you and you have no way to escape. Turns out Fisk anticipated Nadeem going to a grand jury and managed to do some speed chess to coerce all the jurors. It renders Nadeem so paranoid that he decides to knock Foggy out in the bathroom and flee to his home, record a video confessing everything, and just resign himself to his fate when Dex comes by to kill him. The fact that it's not Fisk who orders Nadeem's death, but Vanessa herself. Confirmation that she is just as evil and immoral as him. Episode 13, A New Napkin. Matt is arguably at his breaking point in this episode. First, he interrogates Felix Manning by dangling him over a rooftop, which breaks his leg from the sudden stop. He then sends Dex on a bloody warpath after Fisk by revealing Misk murdered his morality pet, Julie. And in regards to the man himself, he is dead set on killing Fisk, so he's setting Dex toward an objective that he intends to deny him anyway. One gets the feeling that the arc words of the Murdoch boys being cursed isn't just for dramatic effect. It says a lot that Matt gets Felix Manning, a man who has been shown to be one of the few people loyal to Fisk out of some degree of respect rather than just fear, to flip on on Fisk in the first place. As you may remember from Healy, Fisk is the kind of person many people would rather commit suicide than give him up, but Matt's brutal interrogation of Felix has Felix rather take his chance with Fisk rather than endure Matt's torture. That's Matt when he's in a bad mood. Let this one sink in for a minute. Matt turns Dex loose on Fisk's hotel just as a distraction, so Matt could have a better chance of getting to Fisk. Either Dex takes out a significant chunk of Fisk's FBI protection, or the FBI is too busy fighting off Dex to stop Matt. And if, as it did in the end, it does end up as a melee a trois between Matt, Fisk, and Dex, that works to Matt's advantage too. Stone cold manipulation worthy of a true sociopath, and how many innocent people were in Dex's way before he got to Fisk? Matt's damn lucky Dex didn't happen to be in a massacre mood. When Dex shows up at Fisk's wedding, he drives into the garage wearing the Daredevil suit with a smile and Julie's frozen body in the passenger seat. Whatever control Dex has over his madness is completely gone, and he is now truly Bullseye. That's Lim. He's one of the good ones. Fisk breaking Dex's back on a wall corner can be painful to watch, even if Dex totally deserved it, especially the snap sound it makes. After the final fight, Matt furiously declares that Fisk will be facing life in prison, and that if he is to harm anyone else again, Vanessa's role in Nadim's death will be revealed, and she too will be in jail. And, while Fisk's fate is well-deserved, just the sheer amount of rage in Matt's voice can send chills down one's bones. It really does show how far the guy's been pushed after so long of being tormented. Beware the nice ones to the purest core. No prison can keep me. You know that. Come on, kill me! No! God knows I want to, but you don't get to destroy who I am. You will go back to prison, and you will live the rest of your miserable life in a cage. Know that you will never have Vanessa, that this city rejected you. It beat you. I beat you! Matt unmasked himself in front of Fisk. You keep my secret, and you won't harm Karen Page or Foggy Nelson or anyone else, because if you do, I will go after your wife, and I will prove Vanessa ordered the murder of Agent Ray Nadim, and like her husband, she will spend the rest of her life in a cell. Well, damn. So that'll bring us to Jessica Jones in the next episode. How long is this one going to be? I'll be lucky if the next episode isn't just Jessica Jones. So, that about does it for this episode of Let's Read the Nightmare Fuel of TV Tropes of the MCU. My throat is in so much pain from the Kingpin voice, but it was fun. If you liked it, a like and a subscribe will be groovy. If you didn't, you'll need to do either one of those things. If you want to click the bell, you can do that as well, so that you're notified of future uploads. I still don't know why I'm supposed to tell people to smash that like button, because I don't know why people say that, but I'll see you in the next one. Later.